What does it do to kids? It says, hey, I'm not important and I don't matter. I'm not worth living for. I can't motivate my mom to take care of me, so I must not mean much to anybody. Like, if my mom doesn't value me, who would?
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
Dr. Kathy, in today's episode of the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark, we want to talk about, kids. And there's nearly 19 million children in the United States that have at least one parent who has a substance abuse disorder. And that's according to a new study that's been published in JAMA Pediatrics. A significant number of those kids have a parent whose addiction is moderate or severe, as opposed to mild, according to how they rated the survey's data. The number amounts to about 1 in 4 kids who have a parent with an addiction, and this amounts to others caring for their kids. Pediatricians are some of the primary ones who end up giving insight or really caring for kids whose parents have substance abuse. And really, a lot of pediatricians are urged that when they're caring for a young person whose parent has a substance abuse disorder, to really make sure that they're asking and kind of pushing to screen for mental health concerns for the kid, things like depression, anxiety, ADHD. And they kind of note that all of these are much more common in kids who have parents with an addiction. Dr. Kathy, I think it's important for us to understand this. I mean, there is a significant number of parents who have substance abuse issues right now. And I mean, they range from everything from alcoholism to even like THC and marijuana. Those are some of the new ones that are kind of coming down the pipe that nobody's really talking about, because a lot of this generation was really sold in this idea that those were really safe substances to use, and a lot of now adults, young adults, people that I know, are really addicted to them. What does a parent's substance use do to kids? How does it affect their formation, their maturity, their growth, and maybe even their identity formation?
Yeah, negatively for sure, right? We could just throw the word out negatively. First I'll back up and say this is an alarming report. Good heavens. 1 in 4 kids has a parent with a moderate or severe addiction. That's frightening. So what does it do? Well, there's no way the parent can engage well, right? So these parents are sleeping, they're distracted, they're not engaged. It's probably rarer for this parent to ask, can I help you with any homework? They might not know if their kid even went to school that day. So the fact that these children, I'm sure they feel ignored, they feel unimportant in their own home. I've had children through the years say to me things like, it's okay to feel unimportant at church. There's a lot of kids at church, and I don't expect my youth pastor to always call on me. Now, that's a mature kid who's saying that to me. But what they'll say is, but Dr. Kathy, when I feel unimportant at home, that hurts and that breaks my heart. And that's where my anger comes from. So I think, what does it do to kids? It says, hey, I'm not important and I don't matter. I'm not worth living for. I can't motivate my mom to take care of me, so I must not mean much to anybody. Like, if my mom doesn't value me, who would?
Dr. Kathy, I think that's incredibly sobering to think through. I mean, there's obviously things that I even have that I don't know if I'd call them like micro addictions or what you kind of look at them, right? Like everything from the cell phone to the newspaper to the new book that I'm reading to different things in work that I could easily find myself in that place. And it's of no, design or desire of my own. It's just part of life, I think. And I tend to think that these issues that end up rising, things like depression and anxiety, ADHD, those are all exacerbated when we as parents kind of get pulled into a lot of different things. And maybe even when our kids don't have a strong basis for how their identity is being formed, right? Because as parents, we give our kids, maybe I would call it like a primary identity. We want them to build their identity on Christ, but first and foremost, the first people they meet is us as parents. Is that a right assumption to kind of look at this, that a lot of identity formation ends up coming from mom and dad and the family rather than some of those outside forces? And is it right to assume that things like depression, anxiety, ADHD really do, I would say, kind of grow in the fertile soil, so to speak, of, a misunderstanding of identity and having that strong basis? What do you think about that?
Those are great thoughts. And I would concur. Identity is the answer to the who am I question. So when you hear us talk on the podcast about identity, We're talking about how children or adults answer the question, who am I? And identity is formed out of security. We believe that identity comes from people who we trust. And it should be mom and dad first and foremost, grandparents, siblings, both younger and older, aunts and uncles, cousins. The family unit is no joke. God ordained it, and it matters to him who we are a part of in that family unit. And so when parents are not available to help children identify their interests and their skills and their talents and their delights, then the children flounder a bit and they don't know. Identity leads us to belonging, purpose, and competence. So identity, who am I, will lead me to competence, what do I do well? So when children don't know who they are and they don't have their strengths, maybe their whole identity is negative. I'm lost, I'm lonely, I'm alone, I'm isolated, I'm forgotten, I'm confused. When that's their identity, good heavens, then we get to this need to do things well, which again, school would be all about, and they don't know that they can do anything well. I can do confusion well. I can do lonely well. I know how to cope with being lonely. I've had to my whole life. But can I be successful in a school situation? These are real statements. I am not making this up. These are real statements that some children would have. When we have competence, when we raise children up to know who they are and why they are who they are, created on purpose, then they will know who to hang with. They will know that they have purpose, and then they will know what they can do well, even if it takes effort to do so. If they've been told that they're skilled, they're going to look for something to be skilled at. If they've been told that they're a careful worker, hey, daddy, my identity is I am careful. My teacher said that I proofread and I slowed down and I was careful today when we were doing our science experiment and I didn't spill anything, and she was very proud of me. Then you get to competence. What do I do well? And that kid is like, I do careful well. I can do hard things that demand a lot of my attention. And they're going to focus there and they're going to want to develop that ability. Kids who don't know who they are won't want to develop ability. They won't believe they can, and they flounder. And this is where ADHD and depression and anxiety then can come from. But if I'm focused on the positives and I know why I've been created, and there are these things that I can do on purpose, then I'm going to be less likely to want to land in a negative mental health space.
Dr. Kathy, I think that is really helpful, especially when we understand how identity is formed. But part of the dynamic of what you talk about with identity formation is the weight that, especially during the teenage years and maybe even before that, the weight that belonging carries. And I think within belonging, the reality for all of us is that while substance abuse might not be something real in our home, chances are, our kids are going to engage it. If 1 in 4 kids across the nation right now is having a parent who's neglecting them because of substance abuse, it's likely that our kids are going to become friends with them. And in that vein, sometimes we've seen this with other things. There is this, I don't know, kind of herd mentality that kind of comes down where people start talking about the challenges they've experienced, and the belonging system ends up impacting my kid, even though they haven't had a parent who's had substance abuse, but they're kind of taught to look at their parents through that lens, or even find their identity or belonging through that lens of maybe wishing they had ADHD or wishing they had these other realities. And so for me, I just kind of want to go upstream and cut that off, right? And I want to ask this as we kind of close here today. How would you think that we could, step in to better support our real, like the culture that our kids are growing up in? How can we step in and support the different, whether it's institutions or people or communities, knowing that these types of things are oftentimes really flying under the radar because, it's hard to tell if somebody has substance abuse, or if they do, they don't bring it up. And so it's hard for us to even know how to engage that issue of it. But can we support the community? How should we maybe be parenting right now in this cultural moment?
Yeah, great questions, Wayne. One thing I think of is that to know our neighbors, which is so much harder today than it used to be. It shouldn't be hard, but with the busyness, and I think the social media is fine. Like, I have friends there. I think we're less inclined to maybe knock on doors or know our neighbors. Maybe we hold privacy really near and dear to our heart, and that's okay. However, I wonder if it would be beneficial to know our neighbors. And if we see something, can we do something? Can we act on someone's behalf? If we had a neighbor child who we felt was being ignored, who we saw playing outside really longer, into the evening than is appropriate, maybe we try to be helpful and we try to ask some questions and we try to be supportive and get involved. There are probably any number of adults who are stuck in abuse, emotional difficulties, that have chosen a substance to be addicted to because their life is terrible and they don't know how to get out of it, but maybe they would love to get out of it. Maybe they need us to knock on the door. Like, I don't know, but could we do something like that? I think two other things that come to mind, we're big advocates here of parent education, right? Like, it's so disappointing to me, the number of schools and churches who don't offer parent education. And they'll sometimes say to us, well, not enough people will come to make it worthwhile. Like, and I get that. You might not be able to spend lots and lots of money for 20 people, but did those 20 people matter? And did their 75 children matter? Absolutely. And if you don't offer parent education, nobody comes. If you offer parent education on the first Tuesday of every month, and that's the rhythm that you establish in your school and in your church, then maybe they'll mark their calendar and maybe the habit will begin. And what if we did parent education at 3:30 for the people who work the 7 to 3 shift? What if we offered it at 5:30? So, because if they go home and take off their shoes, they're not coming back, for a 7 o'clock meeting. When I lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where I was a professor, we did some really unique things at 6:30 in the morning, because it's easier sometimes for dads to come out from 6:30 to 7:30 in the morning. They know we'll end on time because they have to be at work at 8, and it's just easier. So could we offer education and remind them that their children matter? And that reminds me to say that these people matter. One of the reasons that they've got, sucked into the mess and the valley experience they're in is they probably didn't know that they mattered. They matter. Even if they didn't have children, they matter. And can we teach them that and celebrate that in any way that would help them, rise up beyond the addiction struggle that they're in? And I want to say one more thing, and then I'll kick it back to you where you can end it. And that is that we must remember children are not their parents. Children have not asked for this. Children do not deserve this. And it is not a guarantee that children raised in this environment will become their parents. It is more likely that they will than if they weren't being raised by parents addicted to a substance. And yet we have to understand that it's not a guarantee, and let's not judge, and let's offer hope to them.
As Dr. Kathy was talking today, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Genesis chapter 9, and I'll begin reading at verse 20. Noah, a man of the soil, planted a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked and told his 2 brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders, and when they walked in backward, they covered their father's naked body. Their faces were turned the other way, so they could not see their father naked. When Noah woke up from the wine and found out that his youngest son had done something evil, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers." He also said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. And God extend Japheth's territory. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem. And may Canaan be the slave of Japheth." This event happens after the flood. Noah plants the vineyard, becomes drunk, lays uncovered, and his sons find him. Ham dishonors him, and Ham's brothers instead cover Noah. When Noah woke, he pronounced a curse, not on Ham himself, but on Ham's sons, Canaan, setting the stage for intergenerational pain and alienation. While this story doesn't detail addiction in modern terms, Noah's drunkenness and Ham's reaction reflect really a dysfunctional family moment with far-reaching consequences. But generations after, Ruth the Moabite, who's a descendant from Lot, but still from a shameful family story, and others from other family brokenness, are redeemed and brought into God's covenant family through the power of God's love, the Holy Spirit, and ultimately through Jesus. Shame and sin don't have to define our kids' future, even when we might have parental behavior like addiction, shame, or disengagement, and it creates hardship for our kids. God specializes in redeeming family lines. Children raised in dysfunctional situations can still become faithful, fruitful followers of God. And so as parents today, I think we can help our kids by owning our past and choosing repentance over denial. We can break generational cycles through open conversations that are grounded in biblical truth. I think that pointing our kids to see the gospel as the final word on their identity, but also on our identity and not our past mistakes, can really give them a bright light that shines and cuts through the dark times that they're going to face today or later on in life. So I hope that's an encouragement for you, and I hope this whole podcast is an encouragement for you. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. We're so thankful that you're listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.